Serious truckers of Reddit, what was the weirdest thing you've ever experienced on the road? My dad said one time, while driving at night, he was behind a motorcycle when he saw its light suddenly disappear. He slowed down and came up the biker on the side of the road. Apparently a deer had run across and the biker hit it, causing him to crash. The biker had pretty gnarly compound fracture in his arm, but I guess the adrenaline and/or shock caused him to not feel it. Dude bummed a cig from my dad while they waited for the ambulance to show up. I drive for one of the big ones. I hopped in the wrong truck. Went back in the sleeper and everything. Took him good 10 minutes before he realized he was in the wrong truck. During my training last year, I was heading west through Ohio in the middle of some really dense fog in the middle of the night. My log GPS suddenly reroutes and has me go down a narrow side road. Not knowing any better, I took it. After a mile down the road, it has me to take a left. I get about a quarter mile down and then the GPS tells me I've arrived at my destination despite that I'm supposed to be headed to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I pulled the truck to the side to figure out what was going on when I noticed that the fog had suddenly opened up and I see a rundown house to the right of me. The GPS starts bugging the hell out and puts me back en route to the highway. Only a local driver. Not OTR. I was delivering between two closed towns and was passed by a really strange car one afternoon. It was a plain old station wagon with an ancient old lady driving. She was, literally, staring through the steering wheel as she passed. The car had gangster-style wheel rims, all chrome rim, and not much tire. In the back seat was a full-size plastic Halloween skeleton. It was sitting upright, wearing a tie and a fedora, and belted in just like a person. I would really love to hear the story behind this. My uncle was a truck driver in the 80s. He was around Chicago and another car had road rage because they thought he did something wrong, or whatever. They were swerving at him, cutting him off, etc. He got on the CB multiple times. I don't remember his handle, there's a car that's being a jackwagon. No responses. The car ended up forcing him to exit in a seedy warehouse area near Gary. He tried the CB one more time. Handle, I got forced off here and I think I going to die, he said. About 4 other trucks appeared out of nowhere and started to circle the car and my uncle. The car sped off and the other trucks left and my uncle sat there thinking WTF was that. I was driving on I-94 near Eau Claire, Wisconsin. My cruise set at 65 miles per hour. I came upon a slow mover in the right lane. So I got in the left lane to pass. As I was making my way up along his trailer, I thought I saw him throw something out of his window, which isn't entirely unusual. When I reached the gap between his truck and trailer, I could see his driver's window. It's at this point that I think the driver is mooning me, but then a half second later I realized a disgusting truth. The driver had his cruise set, was sitting on his windowsill with his ass hanging out his window and his feet on the seat. Effectively sitting sideways. And was shitting out his window as he was driving. Driving US 93 in Nevada. At night. Husband and I were hotshot driving from Washington to Arizona. We're native Texans, not used to mountains, curves, or the tricks the desert night plays on your mind. So many dark shadows and animals that we weren't sure were really there. But this is what really messed with me. Stopped at a glorified outhouse to pee. We had to use flashlights to see the toilet, which was a bucket over a hole. Came out to 2 burly men standing by the 2 outhouses. We walked back to our truck to smoke and they just stood outside the outhouse, staring at us. It's pitch black out. Only a single light on the outside of the outhouse. They looked angry and hostile. And the highway is empty. We didn't see any other vehicles for a couple hours at a time. Nobody would have heard us scream. We left so quick. And refused to drive past 9 p.m. ever again. I had some woman decide to show me her new tattoo by bending over and spreading her ass cheeks. The tattoo was a spiderweb she had around her asshole. We were in the middle of the lot and all the truckers watching just started laughing. Once as a child we stopped late night at a rest stop because I needed to use the bathroom. That men's room was packed with a bunch of men and lots of leather and studs. I asked why all these guys were dresses so cool and similar. I asked very loudly while washing my hands. To which my dad said you need to wear a lot of leather when you ride a motorcycle. I, being the ever-observing kid, said, but there's no motorcycles here. My father responded, well, they must have parked them in the back, to which the whole bathroom exploded in laughter. The tree ghosts and shadow people come out around 0300. Sleep deprivation sucks. My stepdad was stopped at a truck stop at night. A random guy opened his passenger side door and sat in the passenger seat without saying anything. My stepdad told him to get out and he did. He locks it now. People masturbating while driving. A giant pile of potatoes. Like 8 feet high. In the middle of a parking lot. My husband is the driver, but He reports that the strangest thing was when he was stranded in the middle of the road due to lake effect snow. All vehicles were. And after like 6 hours. The lady in a car in front of him got out and pooped in the snow where everyone could see her. 2 men 1 woman at least 30 miles from anywhere fighting in the middle of the road at 1:30 a.m. in winter. As I slowed to see if I could help, all 3 ran towards my truck. I noped the hell out of there and called 911 20 minutes later when O got cell reception. I was driving on 81 northeast of Tennessee towards VI when I spooked a mallard duck as I was coming around a corner over a small creek. It tried flying off and got lodged in my sun visor outside the windshield. Immediate kill. Poor thing was pretty too. I had to pull over and use a stick to get it off my rig. I was driving up the interstate highway one night and a pickup truck pulled up beside me. It took me a second to realize that it never actually passed me. Then I look over and there is a very attractive 20-something-year-old woman. Completely naked. In the passenger seat and she's getting fingered by the male driver. She seemed to be really enjoying it. And they had the interior light on purely so I could see. But the thing is, I'm gay. So I didn't really care. I laughed and told the other drivers I was on the phone with about it. And eventually the truck went around me and took an exit ramp after they realized I didn't seem to be all that interested. I'm from a trucking family and this is one my stepdad told us about one night. He was down in Portland dropping a load off. It's the middle of the night and he's wanting to find a place to bunk up. Well, as he's getting in his truck he finds some dude just chilling in his passenger seat. Dad asked him what he was doing and the guy said he's never been inside one before. Dad asked the guy several times to leave and the guy just refused and he wanted to see it up close. My dad, always the diplomat, pulled his SN/45 out and asked if he wanted to see that up close too. The guy didn't even bother with the door and escaped through the open window. Drove local delivery for a while in law. Parked my truck in the yard of a small manufacturer. And while I was waiting on my load, someone tagged my truck as in. Put a large piece of graffiti on it. One of the warehouse workers said, "Hey, someone just tagged your truck," and walked around the corner. I was pissed because we were required to clean the paint anytime someone did that. So I started chasing the motherfucker. Found him around the corner tagging a road sign. I was shocked because this wasn't some teenage cholo. He was a pudgy middle-aged white guy with a beard and a button-down shirt. Khakis, bad-style trainer shoes and a Jansport backpack. I started yelling that he was gonna fucking pay me or clean my truck and he took off running. I've never seen a fat white dude run like that. I was in fighting shape at the time and I had no chance of catching his ass, especially when he was bounding one-handed over barbed wire top chain link fences. It was like I met a real-life superhero. Only a shitty one that just did shit graffiti. I had to drive back to my office and clean the word Miko off the side of my truck for 2 hours. My father had stopped his truck on the side off the highway and set up reflective pylons as required, pretty sure by law, behind his trailer. Drunk driver in a convertible smashed into the back of his trailer and literally lost his head. I've seen severe wrecks. People reading, playing on their phones and playing with themselves. It's sad to say. But nothing really surprises me anymore. I'm more surprised when someone passes me and isn't on their phone. I do not drive trucks, but I have driven cross-country more times than I can count. So I hope my comment can still find a home here. Late night drive in Virginia. Traveling south on 95. Jeep in the left lane pulls a left turn maneuver. Drives straight up and over the median, lands it, and proceeds to continue driving northbound on the opposite side. Also once I looked up and saw 2 cows in coitus just off the highway. STG1 was straight up vertical. I was pulling out of a lot when this clearly deranged woman ran out in front of me. I opened my door to see if she needed help. She wanted a lift. I told her I don't give hitchhikers a ride. Pointed to the lot, said I'll meet her over there and I'll call a cab for her. Woman heads towards the lot, then suddenly she's opening my passenger side door and jumping in. Again. I don't let hitchhikers ride my cab. So I'm circling the lot back to the service door to drop her inside a warm building. All the while she's yelling, "I won't go back. I won't go back." I convinced her to jump out and have a cigarette with me. Meanwhile 3 police cars swarm the lot and arrest her. She had fled a mental health facility like 5 miles away in thin scrubs, paper shoes and a hoodie. It was in the middle of winter. Not like any of these stories, but once I saw 2 birds fighting over a snake flying through the air. And wrapped around the snake was a squirrel. The birds had each end of the snake and were struggling to fly because the weight and each bird pulling the snake. The weirdest thing of all was the birds were aware of me driving through and the truck was a part of their chaotic environment because one bird tried to pull the bird directly into the line of the truck, but at the last moment, that bird let go and swooped away to avoid being hit, then immediately grabbed back onto his end of the snake. Wish I could have saw more of who won the tug-of-war match. I used to ride along with my dad 15 to 20 years ago. Riding through Gary, Indiana. I watched a prostitute get backed over at the Flying J truck stop. She was frantically running with her shoes in her hands. My dad thought I was making it up until the way back through when the CB was full of truckers paying their respects. Always wondered WTF she was running from. Wyoming, very rural and working in oil fields overnight. It's the only place I've experienced inky blacknesses. I've read it 100 times. But only see it there. As you're crawling across a rough dirt road in the middle of a huge ranch and dozens of miles away from so much as a street light. You don't light up the road. The darkness just barely retreats from you and hides in every crevice and rut as you approach. And animals. Like hearing weird clicking noises and occasional taps directly above me. On top of big silos and tanks maybe 60 feet high. Head to the side and see a huge and glorious white barn owl. One time I'm pretty sure it was a hog owl brown owl keeping an eye on me. But he was also very good at staying out of sight when I tried to track him down. Pretty sure he was watching me the entire time. Creeped me out a bit. And once got spooked by some cows and horses. Different ranches respectively. Doing the inky blackness thing. I put pressure on the brake pedal and in my mirrors a large bulk gets illuminated red off the left of my trailer. I rub my eyes and look around more and there were also tiny red dots kind of around it and vaguely out my windows. I turned on my spotlight and shone it around and there was a couple horses chilling near the road out of sight of my headlight but reflecting the red brake lights back at me. Definitely a little spooky but normal. This one is also from my father up in Freeport, Maine. Someone in a car had blown their own at a moose that wouldn't get out of the road. The moose retaliated by attacking the car with its massive horns. Shoving it into the median, ripping the windshield and mirrors off. The moose initially ran off. Then came back to attack the car a second time. The people in the car survived. Somehow. My uncle is a truck driver who has been running an earth-moving business since the late 60s. He was telling me recently that he was on a 50 kilometers run between two very remote towns at around 4 a.m. when a silent craft appeared and hovered above his vehicle for most of the trip, then disappeared. He's one of the toughest men I've ever met and I could see the concern in his face when he told me that. He said his kids were just born and he thought he may never see them again. My dad was a trucker that went all over the country. Him and his brother used to truck together, both in different trucks, doing shady ass shit in the early 2000s with lying about drive time and they were driving along an interstate in the dead of night. His brother hit something and it exploded into blood and they assumed deer. That was until they pulled into a truck stop for the night and they found an arm hanging out of the grill. My dad said they went to the police station to hand it over and I think they got put in the jail for a day before they figured out the whole situation. Someone had committed suicide via semi along the road. It just so happened they picked my uncle's semi.